It's wonderful to be here. Just a few words about James and I, that we are friends and colleagues and partners in the Dharma. My day job is as a life and leadership coach, working with people around aligning their lives with what is most deeply true. And James's day job is as the minister of the Providence First Unitarian Church in Providence, Rhode Island. And together, James and myself and my wife, Melissa, I was about to say our wife, Melissa, but no, there's some limits here in the point. Yeah. We are the co-founders of the Boundless Way Zen community, which has a number of sitting groups throughout New England, mostly meeting in Unitarian churches. And our base of operations is the Boundless Way Temple in Worcester, where my wife and I live and practice. And I am also, my wife and I, longtime members of the First Unitarian Church of Worcester. And this is my first UUBF meeting. And at lunch, at dinner, met some lovely people and got the true pleasure of coming together, which is we can both talk church and Buddhism. So we can talk about dynamics of the church and what's happening, and also talk about this other path that we all share here.
I decided somewhat reluctantly to do one of those question box services, much beloved of ministers who are bereft of an idea. And it was actually kind of fun. I decided I would try to play fair, and so I solicited the questions at the very beginning of the service, and during the offering they came in on little 3x5 cards, and then shuffled them, and then simply worked from the top down. And it was an interesting mix. People had sincere questions they thought I might actually have an answer to. Many wanted to see if they could trap me into some bit of silliness, because I'm pretty easy to trap into some little bit of silliness. The whole process for the service and the amount of time we had only got me down to about a third of the questions. And I took them into my office and set them aside, and then a few weeks later I started looking through them, and I discovered there were a couple of recurring questions. And one of them was, so what is this Unitarian Universalist Buddhist thing? And I decided I should try to address that in a more formal way, which I don't often do from the pulpit. I spoke and then decided, geez, Louise, I have prepared remarks for the convocation. We won't be using such prepared remarks at any other time along the way, but it is nice to have coherence, at least for a few moments in this time together. I did abridge this slightly from it was a great Sunday. We had a visiting gospel choir, and I was speaking of my Buddhism. And there were two moments when I was pretty sure we were in some danger for the service, that people might actually get up and walk out, leaving us without a choir. But they were troopers, and they stayed even as I held forth in things that you will hear in here. The Unitarian Universalist Divine Forest Church used to say that our human knowing we are alive and that we will die births all religions. The great urgency to find some meaning and purpose within our fleeting existence has been the heart of the spiritual enterprise. Of course, religions, all of them, have been caught up in many other things as well, sometimes much less savory. crowd control comes to mind. Most all religions have some variation on the line, my spiritual text said it, I believe it, that settles it. Of course, no, it doesn't. It doesn't take complete and radical honesty to see how no religion has a monopoly on truth, or even that truth is always obvious in any religious assertion. Closer to home and to my own experience, this discontinuity between what I saw of life and what my childhood fundamentalist Christian faith asserted about reality led me out of that church. And it is what drove me into a Zen monastery. Frankly, this disconnect between assertions of what is and what is actually going on is what caused me to leave that monastery as well. This quest for a closer congruence between the assertions of reality and reality as I experience it is what eventually led me to find another, less dogmatic Zen practice. And it is what led me to enter the Unitarian Universalist Church and eventually to become a minister. Truthfully, I'm not done. These constantly arising discontinuities continue to challenge and inform me. Some time ago, I wrote a blog column entitled it, All Religions Are False. Got a lot of hits. And let me tell you, I meant it. My experience is that the religions we've received are, in fact, all of them limited. They are larded with all sorts of assertions about the world that contradict what our eyes see and assert many truth claims about our human condition and destiny that make no sense in broad daylight. I will spare you the litany of falsehoods associated with just about all religions, but I'm sure you can think of a number of inconsistencies or outright whoppers in your favorite religions without breaking a sweat. And this is equally important. At the same time, I could have, and I may yet, write a column called All Religions Are True. There is no doubt in my heart there are subtle and wonderful things to be found within pretty much all of them, from Christianity to Judaism to Islam to Hinduism to the kaleidoscopic varieties of earth-centered faiths. Each contains pearls of great price. I think how we all can find these pearls by opening our hearts wide. Religions, after all, are, in addition to those less savory things, the treasured troves of human wisdom, the repositories of the deep intuitions of many generations. The problem is that in each and every one of them, we need to sort wheat from chaff, noise from message. In order to find the true within religions, we need to bring our hearts open and our heads clear. I've spent the better part of my life engaged in this process. I've started, as I said, within a fundamentalist Christian household. I've listened to teachers in many traditions and scoured their spiritual texts. I've lived in a Buddhist monastery for several years. I'm now an authorized Zen teacher in 2 lineages and one of the guiding teachers of the Boundless Way Zen Network. I've attended theological schools, studying not only the arts of ministry, but also the philosophy of religions, earning an academic MA, as well as my MDiv. I thought a lot, I prayed more falteringly, and I've meditated again, lots. In short, I've examined my life and the lives of this world in the light of several religious traditions. And over the years, I've come to some conclusions about what is wheat and what is chaff, about what in religions actually matters. Now, as most here know, I've come to stand with my feet placed firmly within 2 spiritual traditions. One foot stands in the reformed Zen Buddhism that has planted itself in our Western soil over the last 100-odd years. It is rooted in some ancient spiritual practices and insights, which now live within my heart and inform who I am. Over this weekend, we'll explore more closely what that means for me, for David, and hopefully for each of you. However, I want to hold up how many of us who also identify as Unitarian Universalists come to Buddhism with a bit of a twist. Salvation in classical Buddhism is, in pretty much all versions, was to end the cycle of rebirth, which was believed to be at its heart suffering. That's not my Buddhism. Rather, for the most part, it is the highly psychologized Buddhisms of the West, and particularly within my experience of Zen Buddhism, that I have found salvation, the heart healing we all long for in this world marked by suffering. This healing is discovered by bringing the divided heart-mind together, bringing the many parts of who we are back home, finding the many lives within this life. The Buddhism of my experience finds suffering and grace, hurt and joy, as well as my ethical choices, are all informed by a deep knowing discovered through my disciplines in life that every blessed thing is united, in a very real sense, one, or using a traditional Buddhist metaphor, empty. This spaciousness, this boundlessness is our true home. And for me, this discovery as a personal truth, a deep knowing, or again in the language of this tradition, this great not knowing, is the point of all religion, and what makes it worth putting up with a fair amount of nonsense and bother. While not a Buddhist text, the Chinese classic The Tao Te Ching sings of this home as at first nameless, after all ultimately words, all words fail, hence not knowing, and then named, after all at some point we must speak. Our words and actions are intimate and of great consequence. The nameless, the Tao Te Ching tells us, is the beginning of heaven and earth. The name is the mother of the 10,000 things. The nameless, the empty, the great void, the way, if you wish, God, if you wish, love, is our source, our sustenance, and our eternal return. Whatever our preferred placeholder for this experience, it is our family name. And this is equally important. It is found here in this world, in this body, by you and by me. This is my heart's knowing. These twin truths of unity and separation birthing as love in this world informs everything that I do and am. And as you may have noticed, my other foot is placed joyfully within Unitarian Universalism, sometimes called liberal religion, embracing the way of the rational heart. And here we find the liberal of my liberal Buddhism. I first came to Unitarian Universalism because I felt a lack in Zen as I encountered it in the 60s and 70s and 80s. As I said, all religions are false. Each has its limitations. None offers the truth with that big capital T. And while Buddhism may be a bit less false than most, it too has limitations. Again, I won't bore you with details here. A little research will show you a fair amount in its teachings you can find internally contradictory, silly, or wrong-headed. The thing that mostly concerned me, however, was not doctrinal. The issue of whether there is rebirth in the sense of our actions directly resulting in the birth of a human being who in some sense may be said to be me, or if each breath presents a new life, and it is all resolved right here, right now, leads to the same disciplines. The issue that led me into the Unitarian Universalist Church was that there just wasn't much attention given to community in contemporary Western Zen. Oh, a tip of the hat here and there. But if a Western Buddhist wanted a spiritual home for their kids, pretty much everyone I knew ended up in a UU church. If someone wanted a spiritual community as something more than a place to do the discipline, sort of like going to a spiritual gym, and then home, pretty much the only place where I could go that didn't contradict the parts of Zen I found useful and true turned out to be the local UU church. So bottom line, I wanted a full spiritual community, and there was precious little of that at the local Zen center. Instead, I found it at the UU church. But I also got something more, in fact, I think much more. I vividly remember my first visit to a UU church, hoping for so much, expecting a lot, and falling asleep during the sermon. But as an old Zen hand, I know about falling asleep during spiritual practices. And I returned and returned. And I found something very interesting, something healthful, wheat among the chaff. Unitarian Universalism has two principal currents and two methodologies that exist sometimes smoothly, sometimes not so smoothly, which are derived ultimately from the two traditions that formed our association. The first is Unitarianism, which has historically been concerned with reason and ethics. The slogan for this current has been salvation by character. The second is Universalism, which has been concerned with healing and for which the slogan has been God is love, or love over creed. Love. The same love, it seems, as I found in my Zen practice, although in Zen this was often expressed as compassion. Love, compassion, the same or different. Maybe we can unpack that later. Once I understood these twin currents, salvation by character and love over creed, I felt I'd found the completion of my spiritual quest. Not the completion of the practice, of the doing, but I had found all the parts I needed for a whole lifetime, for my spiritual maturation, and for how I could respond to this world, to what is. Of course, there's still that all religions are false thing. The Buddha warned how we need to take up our practice with diligence, and while looking for the wise counsel, to never put another head on top of our own. Unitarian Universalism in practice is pretty good at the spiritual community thing. We know how to organize ourselves, to provide a nurturing shelter for our children, to engage each other, and to reach out into the world. Then I had my own thing here. This year in our congregation, we're really focused on marriage equality in Rhode Island, which may become law there, and we have been enormously involved in that. Not so much with the reflection part, however, with holding our hearts to account. When I arrived into Unitarian Universalism, I pretty much had to bring my own spiritual practice. As most of us moved away from Christianity, most also forgot how to pray, the classic spiritual discipline of Western religions. Things are getting better. Chalice circles or small group ministry, I think, are very important and amazing homegrown spiritual discipline. Meditation, usually Buddhist, has become common in our UU churches. But that discipline part is still pretty fragile. We need to be careful to cultivate the opportunities for deep reflection for ourselves and for each other. I hope our time together over these next couple of days will hold up some of what this might look like. What practice is, in all its different forms, is reaching out with an open heart. All we need do is stretch our hand out. It will be taken up. Call it God, call it Lord, call it the Great Boundless, call it the Way. It has many names, but it will respond. Let us remember the whole of our way. Open heart, critical mind, and a hand reaching out. This is love. This is compassion. This is the healing of our individual hearts. This is the healing of this world. And this is my confession. This is my faith. I hope it brings you a word of hope. I hope it encourages you to trust your head and to know that doesn't mean shutting down your heart. And here are the slogans of my heart. Sit down, shut up, pay attention, salvation by character, and love over creed. Always love over creed. Our way, however we call it, is ultimately about love. It is about reaching out our hands and our hearts. Do it, and you'll find a hand taking yours. Call it Jesus, call it Guan Yin. Love doesn't care. Love just is. This is my faith.
David, I heard you say a Buddhist teacher is not like a Unitarian Universalist minister.
He knows.
But I didn't hear you say anything about
Yeah,
the
explain that.
assumption behind that.
Yeah,
What is
yeah,
a
yeah.
Unitarian Universalist minister?
Yeah.
What I see is the difference is around the authority that's granted. As I look at coming into the Unitarian worship, there is the freedom of the pulpit, there is the freedom of conscience, and there is the freedom of the pew. And so as a layperson in the Unitarian Universalist tradition, I give the minister this gift of this is not about preaching dogma. You're free to preach whatever you want. And I'm freed, I hear that, and I can take what I want and don't take what I don't want. I don't necessarily see my minister as my spiritual guide. She may be a wise person and hopefully is someone I learn from. And I may have a very intimate relationship with the minister, but that's not part of the deal as I've understood it as a layperson. Whereas in Zen, part of the deal is this intimacy, that there is this one-on-one, and that we are talking about your spiritual life and how it's going. And as James said, there is if I am your teacher, there's you have given me permission to push in some ways, that in this context of the trust and of awakening. But it seems like there's more permission given and more asked for. So sitting as a Zen teacher, not as the authority, but we have some real work to do together that's of a certain kind. Whereas it seems to me in the ministerial role in the UU tradition, it's much more up for grabs. Certainly it can be incredibly intimate, but there's a greater range of what it is. And as a member coming into a UU church, I don't have to have that relationship with you unless I want to. And it's quite to me, as I look at UU churches, and I do work with different churches, it is that relationship is a negotiated relationship.
Yes.
And when it really works, there's a kind of mutuality in it of no one's claiming, well, I claim this. Well, no, you can't claim that because we claim this. But there's something quite stunning about it, I think, when it works because of the clear expectation of equality in UU. And I think that this is part of the wisdom of this tradition that is anti-clerical in some way, which creates then some problems for the clerics, but it leaves the possibility for an alive spiritual community that has found its way together in its own way, but it's a negotiated thing.
When there is trust.
Right. Yeah.
Now, there's also a difference in training and expectation
That's true.
and credentialing. So a minister, there are a few gates one must pass through, but you pick the path if you wish to be a minister you present yourself, you go forward, you undergo a course of training that's primarily academic, though it has a lot of internships and things. You have to pass through a committee that thinks that you're not likely to be an axe murderer, and you're a minister. The To become a Zen teacher is a different path. You might present yourself in some manner, but that's not generally encouraged, and will probably, in fact, have some negative consequences in your relationship with your community, and particularly your teacher. The practice is around the meditation disciplines, the credentialing is because some individual has initiated that approval, said that I think you might be able to teach, lets you do limited teaching for a while, lets one do limited teaching for a while, and then after that trial period may endorse an individual. So in the West, teachers might produce 2, 3, 5, 10 Dharma successors in a lifetime. And so the whole thing becomes it's intimate from the beginning, it's intimate in the middle, and it's intimate at the end. If somebody can speak before large crowds, that's simply an interesting side effect.